Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be talking about Secret Base Studios' revamped retro beat-em-up, Streets of Red Devil's Dare Deluxe. Find out if I felt like I hit the jackpot with this title, or if it turned out to be a bust. Gaming conventions can be a little bit intimidating at times. Whether it's trying to figure out your cosplay, what sweet merch you want to buy, or what panels you want to attend, it's a tricky process. And it's made a whole lot trickier when it becomes ground zero for a zombie apocalypse. But hey, with a bit of improvisation and some help from Ivan the Red Fairy, you too can take on the mantle of hero, righteously smiting the undead hordes and saving their souls one beatdown at a time. I'm not kidding, that's a pretty good summary of the game's intro, as well as the plot in general, really. That said, for those who are interested, there is a final bit of clarification in the game's story near the end, but only if you pursue the game's true ending, which requires you to save a adequate amount of loot to access it, but which provides a final snippet of story for a discerning player. Overall, I'd say the presentation works pretty well, as it does a good job of setting up the overall tone of the game and providing a basic summary of why you're brawling as homages to video game characters. Speaking of, I do mean it when I say brawling, given that Devil's Dare Streets of Red is a beat-em-up, and it's a pretty easy one to pick up and play since its controls are straightforward enough, given you only have to fuss over a basic attack button, a dash dodge button, and a special attack button, which only requires you to hold a direction to toggle different abilities. So, like Smash Brothers, I guess. That said, it should be noted that each of the characters do differ from each other, whether it be their damage, health, or the overall utility and function of their various special attacks. Not only does this provide a fair bit of variety to find a character that meshes with your personal playstyle, it also allows for some rather distinct bits of synergy since the game does support co-op. At least if you have friends that you can wrangle into playing with you in real life, since it is a local co-op. Whilst the basic premise of the game is simple enough, being get to the end of the stage and beat up horror movie trope-inspired bosses, literally, the execution is actually fairly interesting. For one thing, the money you end up beating out of enemies has a 3-tier use in the game, all of which play a part in its difficulty. As for one thing, should you die, you need to pay out of the funds you've acquired to revive. And bear in mind that, like I said during the story section, you actually need a certain amount of funds on hand to be even eligible to see the true ending and the final boss, which also factors into managing your money. That said, there's another factor which also impacts the management of your finances. See, at the end of every stage, you're offered the option between a number of upgrades for your character, which range from boost your health, defense, or even upgrades to your special abilities. All of which cost money. Now, given the abilities provided are randomized and the constant threat of permadeath and restarting from scratch loom, it almost gives off a weirdly roguelite vibe, something which is intensified in the game's hard mode, as it allows you to amp up the difficulty of stages, turning basic enemies into empowered versions of themselves, and also amping up the bosses, in exchange for more money dropped. It also happens to massively increase the amount of money that's lost should you require a revive, and doesn't automatically heal you up between stages. Instead, you'll be relying on trading in your chance at a character upgrade at a stage to camp and heal the full. Well, unless you make good use of the game's fatality system. See, what that essentially boils down to is when you use a special attack to kill an enemy, they explode into extra treasure normally. But if you manage to slaughter a whole bunch of them with a special attack, a healing item is spawned whose effectiveness improves relative to your multi-kill, essentially. The game is admittedly pretty darn hard if you neglect to take advantage of that system, especially as you get to the later boss in the game, which ties to another interesting aspect of Devil's Dare. You actually get to choose the order of the areas you tackle out of its 4 zones, which seems like a simple choice at first, except that each zone gains an additional stage after you've completed the last one, turning the final zone you tackle in a 4-stage long rampage. And given that both the 3rd stage and the 4th stage variants of areas have their own unique secondary bosses, it provides a certain degree of replayability, as each of those zones have 3 different bosses to challenge and beat down on. Well, had, because Streets of Red Edition actually added a hidden fourth boss to each area, which is only accessible if you maintain a 70% fatality rate across the stage, fatality the boss, and play on hard mode. Not picky at all for challenging these bosses. Still, it's a lot of fun, and I definitely had a blast with its adventure mode. Though, I was a lot less taken with its survival mode, which more or less just throws you into a gradually escalating battle against wave after wave of basic mooks to earn a high score. So I gotta say, folks, the soundtrack to this is pretty fun. It's definitely more along the lines of bouncy/arcadey music, but I found myself thoroughly enjoying the tracks as I plunged through stage after stage, since each one has a unique theme. I also really enjoyed the pixel art for this game, as it manages to do a very good job of both representing and parodying its horror movie inspiration. And plus, I also dug the designs for its main characters and the general style of the game. It's just a lot of fun to see in action. So bearing all this in mind, Devil's Dare Streets of Red is just a lot of fun. Like, enough fun that I'm still looking forward to playing it at least a bit more despite having beaten it a handful of times now. It has great character designs, a soundtrack that I enjoy, gameplay that has me honestly looking forward to exploring the characters I haven't muddled around with as much, and playing with friends. That, and also the challenge the last few bosses that I've yet to encounter, which I am looking forward to quite a bit. Oh, and I dug the story enough so that I was actually sort of hoping the true ending was a sequel hook. So, like, there's that. Altogether, I'd say this makes this a hit. At the very least, a rather solid hit in my book. Anywho, all that said, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And for those interested in more indie reviews, developer interviews, podcasts, or our Monday TTRPG content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's a new release. There's also a Discord that you can click the link in the banner or the description to become a part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. Lastly, if you'd like to help support the channel, we do have a coffee running now to help supplement funds for our lovely editor Jack, as well as to make sure we can continue to provide quality content and not wither up into, like, prunes in the meantime. Again, check the description plus the banner for them links. Anywho, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks. Wah 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 wah. Wah 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 wah. Wah 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 wah. Boom. Da da da. Do do do. Oh, that's what I've been humming this entire fucking day. I'm just an idiot.